Thanks, everyone. I'm Arsalan Arif, founder at Endpoints News, and I appreciate you all being here in the room and the thousands watching virtually. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Jason Foster, CEO of Ori Biotech. We're going to be talking about cell and gene therapy manufacturing. And the theme of our JPM show is biopharma's new fundamentals, and CGTs are fundamentally different than the standard pharma play. It's been over 7 years since the first CAR-T approval, and back then there was so much buzz around that. And FDA leaders like Gottlieb and Marx were predicting 10 to 20 gene approval per year, right? And so the reality today is really different than that. Huge numbers of CGT programs have been shelved. Companies are just shutting down research for that. And venture funding is kind of slowed to a trickle in CGT. But we know how important they are as a modality, and super important for patients. And so that one-shot stuff simply can't be ignored. Jason, I noticed on your website at Ori Biotech, you have a patient access tracker. And you say that since that first CAR-T approval, 30,000 patients or so have been treated with commercially available cell therapy. That's it?
That's it. That's a loaded question to start out with. I actually had asked the team, do we know how many patients have gotten treated? This is maybe a year or two ago. And the answer was we don't really know. And so we went out to try and find the information somewhere and ended up creating this patient tracker really to try and focus the industry's attention on what we think is the most important metric. So you just mentioned the ambition to approve 10 to 20 products per year. And we celebrate things like IND submissions and approvals and marketing authorizations, which are milestones for our industry. But ultimately, if we are approving products that can't get to patients, what are we really doing? And so that patient tracker is a constant reminder of what I consider to be the real benchmark, which is how many patients are getting successfully treated with cell therapies and really benefiting from the incredible clinical potential that these therapies have.
So tell me about the bottlenecks here, about why these patients are not getting treated, and then if you could pivot into what is Ori Biotech doing about that?
Absolutely. So most of the folks online and in the room will know cell therapies generally have a very different supply chain than traditional small molecules and biologics, right? So in the traditional world, they call them the first two pillars of medicine, small molecules and biologics. You create a lot of these, you smash out a lot of tablets, you create huge vats of antibodies, you ship them out to the supply chain, the same product goes to every patient. In this new world that we're in with cell therapy in particular, you have autologous therapies, which means that they're targeted, so they're personalized to you. So we make a product for you, it won't work for me, it won't work for anyone in the audience. And that fundamentally has a different set of requirements and a different set of challenges than this kind of large batch manufacturing that we're used to as an industry. And we've tried to apply the learnings from biologics to cell therapy. Some of them have helped, and others, I would argue, have harmed. We sort of are thinking inside the box about how to do this. And if you have a circular supply chain, starting with patient cells, going through an ex vivo, or an outside the body manufacturing process back to an individual patient, we need to think fundamentally differently about that personalized living medicine. So that's the foundation layer, let's say. And the logistics associated with that and the challenges associated with that are significant. And that really has been the bottleneck to getting more patients treated. As you said, there's been the numbers are non-specific. Let's say 30 to 40,000 patients, probably somewhere in there, have been treated thus far over the last 7 years across what's now 8 products. And that fundamentally, in 2024, we will have treated for the first time 10,000 patients. 10,000 patients and their families, that's a fantastic outcome for them. Unfortunately, hundreds of thousands of other patients haven't gotten treated. So the statistic gets quoted quite often, 2 out of 10 patients in the US who need therapy can get access. In the rest of the world, if you average it out, it's about 1 in 5. 1 in 10. So the real challenges are, how do we manufacture a living medicine for an individual patient and get the same product out of our GMP manufacturing process? And today, unfortunately, we rely on tools that are a decade old. to try and do this. And there's a lot of manual steps. There's a lot of highly skilled operators. And they're essentially moving fluids around a process. They're micropipetting, they're tube welding, all those things that the audience did when they were in the lab at some point maybe. And those are highly error fraught processes. They're very expensive and they're very low throughput. So for us to solve this problem at scale, which is really the ambition of Ori, we need to solve 3 problems simultaneously. We need to solve the throughput problem. We need to create more doses for patients. We need to have a way to get more doses through the process. We need to do so at a lower cost. So today's CAR T therapies, if you take that as an example, cost somewhere between $150,000 to $250,000 per patient. That's the cost of goods. We then sell them for somewhere between $400,000 to maybe $600,000 per patient. And so those kinds of costs to manufacture drive higher prices, and they cause access challenges, as you and I were talking about. So it's throughput, it's cost of goods, and then it's quality. Believe it or not, 1 or 2 out of 5 doses, so 20 to 40% of the doses that we manufacture come out of spec. So they miss their target. The company who manufactures it pays the costs of manufacturing, but isn't then able to sell the product. So that, if you look across all your batches, further increase your cost. So these are the types of challenges that need to be addressed in order for us to move from treating 10,000 patients a year to hundreds of thousands of patients a year. And that's the ambition of Ori.
So tell us about your product. So it's like a white locker, like about this big or so?
About that big or so? Yeah, I always joke it's about the size of a microwave oven, but not your microwave oven, like your grandmother's microwave oven, turned up on its end.
What are the design principles behind it? How does it work?
So Tim Hunt, the CEO of ARM, came to visit us in our labs. And he said, it looks like it was been designed by Apple. And I was like, yes, so we did something right anyway. But so the Eero instrument, as it's called, we named it Eero. Those of you that are wordsmiths in the room realize that's Ori spelled backwards. But we liked the Eero phraseology because it rhymes with hero, and we're supporting the heroes of cell therapy, and so that was a nice double entendre. But what it does essentially is automates the core parts of the manufacturing process, which include today the genetic reprogramming step of cells when we turn them from regular T cells into CAR T cells as an example, and then the growing up, the expansion as they call it, in that process. And that takes, of a 10-day process, that's about 70%. So it's about 7 out of 10 days. And if you're able to not only reduce the number of people involved, but also reduce the number of manual handlings and the ingredients that go in. So today we do things, we're taking human immune cells. We're trying to essentially mimic the human body because we want them to grow and do all the things they would do in the body. We use viral vectors to genetically reprogram them most often, or other transfection technologies. And then they grow for 5 to 7 days, and to get the right number to create that therapeutic product, to create the clinical benefit that we want with the patient. So the Eero platform automates the core bottleneck, increasing throughput by somewhere between 10 to 50 times. So we can get 10 to 50 times the number of doses using Eero as you can out of today's manual process in the same facility, the same footprint. So what that means, if you look at kind of a single clean room, we can get 1,000 doses a year out of 1,000 square feet of clean room space. That's about a 95% reduction in the massive amount of facility space you need. So massive increase in throughput. The second element that we talked about, cost of goods. We cut cost of goods by roughly 30 to 50%, depending on your process. Most of that will be as a result of taking labor out of the process initially, and also through more efficient use of things like viral vector, media, activation reagents. There's a lot of expensive ingredients, if you will, that go into this process. And so if you're able to use those more efficiently, you can drive cost savings. The third pillar on quality is we can shorten processes from what today might take 7 days or 10 days down to maybe 5, 6 days, which drives efficiency, but also those out of spec rates we talked about. So when those products don't meet the specification that the regulators set for them, we can drop those maybe from 20% to under 5%. So you're sort of attacking all 3 of those major challenges using the Eero system, which will hopefully enable widespread patient access, not only in the Western world, but everywhere in the world for patients.
So all this automation and stuff that you have going on there, isn't there a trade-off with biological quality that's coming out of this? Isn't that a traditional trade-off between the two in this industry?
It's a great question, and it has been. Certainly the first generation of automation technology was as the industry would kind of play back to us, say it's very inflexible. So we had to kind of shoehorn our process and get it to trying to work within the constraints of the technology. We've built the Eero platform specifically to flex to the needs of the process. So we can do different cell types. We can do CAR T. We recently had our first TIL approval. We've had our first TCR approval. We've done work across a broad range of cell types. So you can actually apply the same manufacturing system or technology to lots of different programs. So that's the first kind of flexibility element. The other is there's a lot of manual operations that need to take place, maybe some at a low volume. We need to put some viral vector in with the cells at a 50 mil in a tea flask or a bag. But then we need to go up to 1 liter working volume to get our therapeutic dose out the other end. So we have the ability to start with 50 million patient cells that you might get from the apheresis from the hospital and go all the way to over 12 billion cells of therapeutic product, which is way more than most CAR T products would need. But it all happens inside that Eero instrument. So the trade-offs you used to have to make to get the benefits of automation are no longer required. We are able to deliver the best-in-class biology, but also the benefits of automation, higher throughput, lower costs, and better quality.
Can you tell me about what it takes to actually take, let's say, a client's manufacturing process that they may have already had in place? Is it possible to then transfer it to your method, or do they have to be working with you from like literally inception of the therapeutic?
The answer is yes. So we can do both. So generally, the earlier we engage with a program, the better, just because it eliminates sort of duplicative effort. But we have translated a dozen processes off of the first generation platforms onto the Eero system. Normally, tech transfer or sort of that translation process takes about 6 to 9 months to be able to effectively transfer over your process and all the documentation, the training for the staff, and all those things you need to do to validate that process. We demonstrated with our partners in Houston, CTMC, which is a joint venture between MD Anderson and National Resilience, that we could do tech transfer in 6 weeks, not 6 months. And that has a massive impact on the development timeline for your therapy, because you'll do tech transfer probably 2, maybe 3 or 4 times during a process, maybe from an academic center into a CDMO, from a CDMO to a clinical research site, clinical manufacturing site to commercial scale. So there's a bunch of times you have to do this process. And if we can shorten that by 8 months, that could have a massive knock-on impact. You're talking about shaving maybe 2 to 3 years off the drug development timeline for a cell therapy. Bringing that product to patients in 7 or 8 years instead of 10 or 11 years could have a massive impact. So that's one of the benefits of being able to tech transfer quickly. And because the automation technology is what it says on the tin, right? It's automation, so you're taking people out. A lot of that training burden and a lot of the variability that you introduce as a human being into a process is eliminated. So the tech transfer sort of structure goes more quickly, but then the implementation of more regular manufacturing is much easier. So also with that proof of concept we did with CTMC, after we tech transferred their process from their existing platform onto the Eero in Houston, we then tech transferred to a second site. We went from Houston to Philadelphia. And we did that tech transfer in 2 weeks. Again, much shorter than it would normally take. We ran 6 parallel runs, 3 in each site, and sent all 6 back to their analytical lab in Houston. All 6 batches met their clinical criteria, their CQAs for their phase 1/2 trial. So they were the same product. And that was a first of class, or first time that we've been able, and anyone has been able, to demonstrate multi-site manufacturing in that time frame and delivering an equivalent product out the other side.
I see that you had some news recently. I saw that you announced some customer deliveries to multiple CDMOs.
Yes.
And a pharma partner. What more can you tell us about that, who they might be, how they are using your technology now and evaluating it?
So yes, in December we had our first customer deliveries. So 3 customers were delivered 4 Eero instruments. All in the US, actually. So one big pharma partner, as you mentioned, who has commercial CAR T experience. They have a commercial CAR T in the market. 2 CDMOs, that one is a global top 5 CDMO player. The other is a next-gen CDMO, mostly US-based. And they're sort of engaging with the technology for different reasons. So the big pharma partner has experienced the pain of manufacturing that we've been discussing firsthand. I think there's only half a dozen companies that have actually experienced firsthand For most people, this is a theoretical problem. We've got, development challenges, early stage clinical or preclinical. We'll sort that manufacturing stuff out down the line. There's only a few companies that actually it's quite complicated when you kick the can down the road to try and sort it out after the fact. So they've felt the pain, and we've demonstrated that we're able to shorten their process, improve some of their biological outcomes, and they've become our first customer. We're working with them in 2 of their preclinical development programs, which is exciting, and we'll see does it make sense potentially to address the commercial product and that need at some point. With the CDMOs, it's a little bit different in that traditionally, at least in my experience, the CDMOs have been somewhat reactive. A program comes to them, the sponsor or the research group will ask, can you help us close down these steps? Can you help us get IND ready, get us into the clinic? That's generally, they will take that on board and they will, do that work. What hasn't worked very well is to take an academic process and try and put it on steroids and try and jam it through the clinical process and hope that it works out at commercial scale. It just hasn't done. And then we've seen that with Kymriah and others where the volumes that Kymriah have treated have been flat for 5 years, essentially 1,000 patients a year, because they were just never able to get that process to scale. So what our CDMO partners are more intent on doing now is being more proactive with those sponsors as they come in to say, we've looked at your process, we see the benefits here, we see some opportunities here, potentially to automate earlier, potentially to limit out of specs, to get better biological performance, to lower cost of goods. All of those things, in my view, that kind of commercial viability effort needs to take place alongside safety and efficacy research in that kind of preclinical phase. Because if you wait too long, as we discussed, eventually it becomes too late. And what ends up happening, and what has happened, unfortunately, with some of the initial products, is that we have taken a product through the clinical process. We've demonstrated safety and efficacy, but what we haven't been able to do is to deliver the product at scale. And so the impact, the clinical and ultimately economic impact of that product has been very small. And that, that is not good for anyone. That's not good for patients. That's not good for the regulator. That's not good for the sponsor. They spent $1 billion, at least, maybe more, to bring that product to market. We need to make sure that it can get to patients and that you can deliver an ROI for that massive investment that you've made. And that's the kind of partnerships that we're driving with our CDMO partners, is really to address that commercial viability question earlier in the development cycle.
Okay. We only have about 2 minutes left, but
Yeah.
I want to ask you one question because you've been on so many different sides of the business, and eventually we're going to need venture funding to go back into CGTs in order to develop these companies and get out there. What's it going to take for investors to be interested in this space again?
I think we hit on the key point just then, which is we know biopharma are businesses. They take a lot of risk to develop products, and we need to know when those products get approved, they can get covered, they can make it to patients, and that they can essentially accrue sales to deliver an ROI for that investment. And because we have let commercial viability lag, we haven't really focused on it. The interest in the industry from big pharma, big biotech, and venture investment has waned because they have a question. Are these products commercially viable? Can we make a return on investment if we were to put hundreds of millions of dollars into this business? And that is really the only outstanding question. We know they work. They have curative potential. We know they're safe. But the question is, can we actually deliver an ROI for that investment? And pharma BD&L teams aren't licensing these products. We have an unprecedented situation where you have 3 products that have been approved in the last year, all 3 of which the innovative company are launching them themselves. So you have Adaptimmune, you have Autolus, and you have Iovance, all taking it to market. Their first product is a cell therapy that was just approved. They don't have a big pharma partner, and that's a difficult ask. They have to build out all the infrastructure, the market access, the sales, the delivery, all of those things that have to happen are super complicated. So I think for the cell therapy to come into the next phase, the next renaissance for the industry, it's really about answering the commercial viability question. Can we get this product to market? Can we get cost of goods in a place where we can make profits? Can we deliver enough doses to enough patients to deliver an ROI to our investors for the risk that they took? And if we can answer that question, I think the future of CGT is very bright. We're looking at it not only in oncology, but autoimmune, cardiovascular disease, pretty much any disease you can think of, this has potential application.
All right. Well, I wish you all the best of luck in your mission over there and getting all this access to patients for these cell and gene therapies. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks very much for having me.